I never thought I'd cry at a wedding again. I suppose when you've buried more friends than you can count, you learn to hold your tears tight, save them for the funerals. But that morning, the morning my son was to be married, something inside me felt different. The sun looked brighter than it had in years. The old house smelled of lilies and aftershave and nervous excitement. My daughter-in-law-to-be, her name was Anna. I had only met her twice before the wedding. She was quiet, polite, too polite. The kind of person who carries more silence than words. And yet from the first time I looked into her eyes, I knew something. Something I couldn't name. I was never the kind of father who interfered in my boys' choices. Daniel, my son, was always sure of what he wanted. He was like his mother that way, brave, impatient, always chasing the next sunrise. Anna grounded him, I could tell. She made him calmer, steadier. But that morning, when she walked down the aisle, something hit me like thunder. Her face, her eyes, the tilt of her smile. I had seen them before. Not in passing, not in a photograph, but years ago, on a road slick with rain, when I was sure I was going to die. It was 1989. I was driving home from my late shift, the kind that leaves your bones humming with exhaustion. The rain came down in sheets that night. I took a turn too sharp near Miller's Bridge, and next thing I knew, the car had flipped. I remember the sound of metal bending, glass exploding, blood in my eyes, and then a voice. Soft, trembling, but determined. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" Through the fog of pain, I saw her, a young woman with a flashlight in her hand, drenched in rain, crying but refusing to leave me. She broke the window with a rock, pulled me out and called for help. I never even got her name. Now, standing in that chapel, watching that same face walk toward my son, dressed in white, my breath caught in my chest. She smiled, and in that instant I knew. The woman who saved my life was marrying my boy. I wanted to stand up, to tell someone, to stop the ceremony. But what would I say? How do you interrupt happiness with ghosts of the past? As the priest spoke his words, I sat there, my heart wrestling with every memory that came flooding back. Her trembling hands in the rain, the way she looked at me like she knew I was slipping away. And now here she was, radiant and alive, but her eyes still carried that same quiet sorrow. I realized something else. Maybe she didn't remember me. Maybe she did and was pretending not to. Either way, I had to know. That night, after the reception ended, I walked outside under the garden lights. The laughter faded behind me, replaced by the hum of crickets and distant thunder. She was there, standing alone near the roses, her white gown glowing like a ghost under the lamps. I walked closer, my cane sinking slightly in the damp soil. "Anna?" I said softly. She turned, startled, and when her eyes met mine, I knew. Recognition. Her lips trembled. She whispered, "You remember." I didn't say another word at first. I just stood there, watching her breathe, the way her chest rose and fell, trembling as though the air itself was too heavy to hold. She looked so small in that white gown, so fragile. The laughter from inside the hall echoed faintly, the kind of joy that feels far away when your mind's stuck in a memory. Finally, I said, "It was you, that night on Miller's Bridge." Her eyes filled instantly. She nodded, slow, almost ashamed. "I didn't think you'd remember," she whispered. "I've remembered every day since." For a long time neither of us spoke, just the sound of the rain startin' again, soft, gentle, like it remembered that same night too. I said, "You saved my life, Anna, and now here you are, part of my family." She smiled faintly, but it wasn't joy. It was something else, a sadness wrapped in gratitude. Maybe I've just been walking in circles, trying to finish something I never could. I frowned, leaning slightly on my cane. "What do you mean?" She looked away toward the garden lights, their glow catching the edges of her tears. She said quietly, "When I pulled you from that car, I wasn't alone. My fiancé was with me. We were coming home from a rehearsal dinner. We stopped because we saw your headlights crash off the road." Her voice broke. "He went down first, tried to unbuckle you before the flames spread, but the car shifted. He didn't make it out." The world tilted. The sound of the party faded completely, replaced by the thundering in my chest. She continued, "I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. I was young, broken. Every time I thought about that night, I saw his face, not yours. So I left town, tried to start over." "And then?" I asked softly. "Years later," she said, "I met Daniel at university. I didn't know he was your son, not at first, but when I visited your house for dinner and saw your old photos, I realized. I wanted to tell you both, but by then it was too late." The rain intensifies slightly, slow cinematic ambiance. I remember feeling my knees weaken. I gripped my cane tighter, trying to steady myself. All these years I'd lived thinking that night had no other victims, but she had carried the weight of it all along. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she whispered. "Daniel loves you so much, I couldn't destroy that. I couldn't make you both see me as the reason someone else died." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had saved me, who had lost someone she loved, and who had carried that wound into the life she was now building with my son. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt sorrow for both of us. "Anna, do you know what forgiveness looks like?" She blinked. "It looks like this," I said, and I opened my arms. For a moment she hesitated. Then she stepped forward, buried her face in my chest, and cried the cry that only comes from years of silence breaking. I don't know how long we stood there. Minutes, hours, maybe forever. When she finally pulled away, her makeup had smudged, her eyes red but calm. "Does Daniel know?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, he doesn't. I don't think I'll ever tell him." I thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. Some truths don't need to be told. Some are meant to be carried, gently, quietly, like old letters in a drawer. She looked at me then, surprised. "Do you not hate me?" I smiled faintly. "How could I? You gave my son the one thing I couldn't give him, a future." Later that night, as the last guests left and the lights dimmed, I sat in the back pew of the empty chapel. The scent of flowers and wine hung in the air. I could still hear their laughter in my mind, Daniel and Anna dancing somewhere in the dark. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. I felt forgiven. That night, I dreamed of the rain again. But this time, when I saw the headlights, the crash, the woman pulling me from the wreck, there was no pain, no blood, no fear. Just light and peace. When I woke up, the sun had already risen. The world looked softer somehow. I brewed my coffee, sat on the porch, and listened to the birds. In the distance, I saw my son's car pull into the driveway. Anna waved from the passenger seat, her hair loose, her smile real this time. She had finally let the past breathe, and so had I. Sometimes life doesn't give us happy endings. Sometimes it gives us quiet ones, and those are the ones that save us.
That morning, I sat at my desk by the window, the same desk I had kept since Eleanor passed. It faced the garden where she once planted white roses. Their blooms were smaller now, thinned by time, but they still carried that same scent she loved, faint and clean, like old paper after the rain. I hadn't written a letter in years. These days everything was text messages and emails, quick words with no weight. But I wanted something that would last, something Anna could touch one day, long after I was gone. So I took out my old fountain pen, the one Eleanor gave me on our 20th anniversary, and laid a single sheet of paper in front of me. For a moment I just stared at it, feeling the years press down on my shoulders. There's something humbling about facing a blank page when your heart is full. Finally, I began to write. Dear Anna, if you are reading this, it means I could not say everything I wanted to say face to face. You see, words are strange things. They fail us when we need them most. The night of your wedding, when you told me the truth, I felt the world fall quiet inside me, not from anger, but from recognition, because, in some way, I already knew. I saw it in your eyes the first time Daniel introduced you, that quiet distance, that ache of someone who has seen too much pain to ever really rest again. It wasn't guilt I saw, it was love. You carried a burden you never should have carried alone, and now I want you to lay it down. You are not the cause of death, Anna. You are the reason I lived. And because of that, you became part of something larger than tragedy. You became my daughter. I forgive you, not because I am kind, but because there is nothing to forgive. With all the years I have left, I want you to live, truly live. Raise children, laugh loudly. Don't let shadows dictate your light. And when Daniel asks why I smile every time he says your name, tell him it's because you remind me that even in grief there can still be grace. Yours truly, Robert. When I finished writing, I placed the letter in an envelope and sealed it with wax, the way Eleanor used to when she sent me love notes during the war. I wrote her name on the front in slow, deliberate strokes. To Anna. Then I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, the same drawer where I kept Eleanor's letters, my wedding ring, and a photograph of Daniel as a child holding a paper airplane. That drawer had become something sacred, a collection of everything worth remembering. And now Anna belonged among them. The morning sun drifted through the curtains, slicing the room into gold and shadow. Dust danced in the light, moving slow and graceful, like time itself had decided to linger a while before passing through. I leaned back in my chair, let out a long breath, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by that night on the bridge. Instead, I felt complete. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and carried it outside to the porch. The wooden boards creaked beneath me, a familiar sound, like an old song I'd forgotten the words to. The air smelled of rain and soil, fresh and heavy with life. From where I sat, I could see Daniel's car parked under the maple tree. He and Anna were inside, laughing about something. Their laughter floated across the yard, young, unburdened, free. I smiled to myself, feeling a warmth in my chest that no sunlight could match. I thought of Eleanor again, how she'd always say life was a circle, not a line. We begin, we lose, we learn, and somehow we find our way back to the beginning, softer, wiser, more human. That morning, I felt that circle closing, not as an ending, but as a quiet return. I wasn't afraid anymore. Later that afternoon, I walked into the small-town library, the same one Eleanor and I used to visit every Friday. The librarian, Miss Harper, still remembered me. She smiled kindly and said, "It's been a while, Mr. Carter." I nodded. "Yes," I said softly, "it's been a long while." I donated a few old books that Eleanor had loved, poetry mostly, Frost, Yeats, a little Emily Dickinson. And as I placed them on the counter, I slipped the sealed envelope beneath one of them. Miss Harper frowned slightly. "Sir, you forgot this." I smiled. "No," I said, "that one's meant to find its way later." She hesitated, then nodded. And I walked out, feeling the light breeze tug at my coat. That night I sat on the porch again under the stars. The world was quiet except for the crickets and the soft hum of the streetlight. I thought about how strange life is, how one night, one accident, one chance meeting can ripple through decades, how the people we save sometimes end up saving us back. The letter sat hidden in that library for weeks before Anna found it, but that's a story for another time. For now, All that mattered was this. I had finally written the words I'd been holding for 30 years. And in that act, in that small, trembling act of honesty, I felt Eleanor beside me again, her voice soft and sure, whispering the same thing she said on our last night together. You did what you could, Robert. That's enough.
When Emma found the letter, it wasn't by accident. She had grown up hearing only one version of her grandfather's story, that he had become confused, that he needed special care. Melissa had painted the picture so convincingly that even Emma's father, Mark, had stopped arguing years ago. But something about that lie had always felt too tidy. Emma was 19 now, studying art history at a small college 2 towns away. She came home for holidays, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. Melissa had filled it with new furniture, new paint, and a silence that followed Emma through every hallway. That morning she had been cleaning out her old art supplies when a small envelope fell from between the pages of a sketchbook. It was yellowed, sealed with tape, and the handwriting, slanted, neat, stopped her heart. For Emma, when she's ready. She sat down on the edge of her bed, hands trembling as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded 3 times. The letter began simply, "My dear Emma, there will come a time when you'll wonder why people you love can lie so easily. Don't let that make you bitter. Let it make you curious. Go to the garden, the one behind the shed. Look beneath the 3rd rose bush your grandmother planted. You'll find something there. It's yours now." The words shimmered between grief and hope, and something inside her, a small flickering intuition, told her this was not a goodbye letter. It was a map. It took her an hour to gather the courage. The garden had grown wild since her grandfather's passing. Melissa rarely went there. She said it attracted bugs. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked soil and forgotten blossoms. Emma knelt beside the 3rd rosebush, her jeans catching on thorns. She began to dig with her hands, the damp earth filling her nails, the smell of it thick with memory. Her heart thudded when she hit something hard. A small wooden box, weathered but intact. On top of it was a carved engraving, her grandmother's initials, G.C. Emma brushed the dirt off, breath shaking. She lifted the lid. Inside was wrapped in old fabric, a metal key, a flash drive, and a handwritten note. Emma, if you are reading this, I trust you have found your way not just to the garden, but to the truth. The key is for a locker at Westfield Storage, Unit 19B. Inside, you'll find documents your grandmother and I prepared. They will explain everything about the house, about the business, and about the love that built all of it. Do not tell your father yet. He must see it for himself, not hear it. Love always, Grandpa. Emma sat in the dirt for a long time. The sky had turned gold and gray, and a faint wind stirred the roses. She remembered the sound of her grandfather's laughter, the kind that filled a room without asking permission. She remembered how Melissa had called him old-fashioned and too sentimental. Now she wondered if sentimental was just another word people used when they were afraid of honesty. That night, Emma barely slept. At dawn, she took the first bus into town and found the storage facility. It was an old building, red brick with white numbers painted along the row of doors. She walked down until she found 19B. Her hand shook as she turned the key. The lock clicked open. Inside was a simple wooden chest, a little dusty, but carefully placed on a tarp. On the lid, another note. Grace's Garden Fund, for those who still believe in kindness. She opened it slowly. Inside were folders, neatly labeled, business sale agreement, trust transfer, personal letters, will revised, and final instructions. And on top of them, a small leather-bound journal. It smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and ink. She opened it and began to read. March 2nd, 2016. Grace is gone. I can't bring myself to sleep in our room anymore. Melissa says we should sell the house, start over. But this place is more than wood and paint. It's memory turned solid. She'll never understand that. I met with Attorney Dawson today. I rewrote everything. If anything happens to me, the property, savings, and what remains of the business proceeds will go into a trust for Emma. She's the only one who looks at this world with the same eyes Grace did, soft but not afraid. August 19th, 2019. I've started to see Melissa's shadow around the edges of my life. She asks too many questions about money. She offers too much help managing bills. I told Mark not to worry, but I can see he's already surrendered to her version of love, the kind that feeds on control. I've hidden copies of everything, one at Dawson's office, one here. If you're reading this, my dear girl, know that truth always leaves fingerprints. Emma's tears hit the paper. She kept reading, turning page after page, each one painting a clearer picture of quiet betrayal and the gentle dignity of a man who refused to hate. He had known what was happening. He had seen it coming. And instead of fighting loudly, he had written quietly, carefully, planting the truth where only kindness could uncover it. At the bottom of the chest, there was an envelope with Emma's name on it. If they ever tell you I was confused, remember this: love never forgets. I left you something, my dear, something you'll understand when you see the world clearly. Go home, open the drawer in my old writing desk, and look beneath the false bottom. You'll find your real inheritance. Emma hurried home, heart pounding. The rain had started again, soft but steady. She slipped into her grandfather's old study, a room Melissa rarely entered because she'd once called it cluttered with ghosts. The desk was still there, dusty but untouched. She knelt and slid her hand beneath the drawer's lining. Her fingers brushed against something solid, a small black notebook. Inside there were sketches, small writings, and at the back an envelope containing an old photograph. It showed her grandfather standing in front of the house, holding her as a baby. Behind them, a sign that read, Grace's Garden, established 1979. And tucked with it, another letter. Emma, I've left you not wealth, but roots. This house is yours. The deed has been transferred to your name under the trust. You'll receive it on your 21st birthday. By then, I hope you'll have learned the most important thing. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let cruelty rewrite the story. She sat there for a long time,
crying quietly. Outside, thunder rumbled over the hills, and for a moment she swore she could smell her grandfather's pipe smoke, faint and familiar. Melissa came home later that evening and found Emma sitting at the desk. The look in her eyes was calm, too calm. "Emma, what are you doing in here?" Melissa asked. "Just reading," Emma said softly. "Grandpa left a lot behind." Melissa smiled tightly. "You know most of that stuff isn't important. He was unconfused." Emma looked up then. Her voice didn't tremble. "He wasn't confused. He was kind. That's something you'll never understand." She closed the notebook gently, stood, and walked past her without another word. That night, in her small dorm room, Emma lit a candle and reread his final line. "You can't plant forgiveness in poisoned soil, but you can plant truth. It just takes longer to bloom." And as the flame flickered, she whispered to the empty air, "Grandpa, it's blooming now."
Winter came quietly that year. The first frost painted the windows before Thanksgiving, turning the fields into a blur of silver and white. From my porch, the world looked like it had been dipped in glass, still, fragile, and achingly beautiful. The trees behind the house had shed their leaves weeks ago, their bare branches scratching against the gray sky like sketches from another life. I liked the quiet. Age had a way of teaching you that silence isn't loneliness. It's simply the sound of the world catching its breath. I spent most mornings wrapped in my old wool blanket, reading Eleanor's favorite poems, sipping coffee that had gone cold before I remembered to drink it. The fire crackled softly, and sometimes, when the light hit the mantel just right, I could almost see her reflection in the framed glass of our wedding photo, smiling, as if she was still waiting for me to finish the crossword. Daniel called every Sunday. His voice carried that same gentle enthusiasm it always had, though I could hear something different now. The cautious warmth of a son watching his father grow old. He'd ask if I needed anything, if I was eating well, if the snowplow had cleared the road. And then, without fail, he'd say, "Dana says hi." I could almost hear her smile through the phone. Those words always filled me with something I couldn't quite name, a mix of gratitude and melancholy. They'd built a life together, simple, sturdy, like the kind of life Eleanor and I once had. And that, I thought, was enough. December crept in like a ghost, soft and quiet. The days shortened until the afternoons felt like dusk. By the time Christmas week arrived, the world was wrapped in snow, and the air carried that familiar smell of pine, wood smoke, and distant bells. Daniel and Anna came home on Christmas Eve. The sound of their laughter as they stepped through the front door broke the long silence of the house. "Dad," Daniel said, hugging me tight, "you look good." I smiled faintly. "You need better glasses." Anna laughed softly, and for a moment I saw her not as the woman burdened by guilt, but as the same radiant soul who had once pulled me from the wreckage. She was glowing now, not from the lights, but from peace. We spent the evening by the fire, exchanging small stories and bigger silences. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. The kind that feels like rest. Daniel poured us each a glass of brandy,
and the three of us sat watching the snow fall beyond the window. Outside, the world looked so pure, so untouched. Anna leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. I thought of how far we had all come, how the past had stopped being a wound and become a lesson. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I found myself standing in my study again. The drawer was still there, the letter still hidden inside. The wax seal had darkened with time, but the name written on it, "To Anna," was still clear. For a moment I thought of taking it out, of giving it to her tomorrow. But then something in me whispered, "Not yet." There's a time for truth, and then there's a time for peace. Sometimes they aren't the same thing. So I closed the drawer and turned off the light. That night sleep didn't come easily. The house made its old sounds, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the faint creak of the wood, the distant howl of wind through the fields. And in that rhythm I found myself listening for Eleanor's voice again, not in words, but in memory, the kind of memory that comes like a slow snowfall, gentle but heavy. She used to say, "Love doesn't end, Robert, it just changes its shape." And lying there in the dark, I understood what she meant. Love had changed its shape many times, from her to Daniel to Anna, and somehow it had kept me alive long after I thought I'd used up all my heart had to give. A week later, the snow stopped falling. The sun came out for the first time in days, and the air had that strange stillness that only winter mornings know. Daniel and Anna decided to stay through New Year's. They spent their afternoons baking, watching old movies, teasing each other the way only young couples do. I mostly sat in my chair, half watching, half listening. The sound of their laughter filled every corner of the house. And yet, under all that warmth, I felt something shifting, a quiet ache, like a song nearing its final note. I could feel my body slowing, a tiredness that sleep couldn't fix. It didn't frighten me, it just felt natural. Eleanor had always said she'd come for me when the time was right. Maybe, I thought, she was just taking her time through the snow. On New Year's Eve, I fell asleep before midnight. When I woke, the house was still. The fire had burned low, and faint music played from the next room. I sat up slowly, and that's when I saw it, the drawer, open, the envelope, gone. My heart jumped, but only for a moment. I knew somehow that it was Anna who had found it. I imagined her reading it by the dim kitchen light, her eyes tracing every word, her breath catching at the forgiveness she never expected. Maybe she cried, maybe she didn't, but I hoped she smiled. Because that letter wasn't just my goodbye, it was my thank you. The next morning, Anna came to me quietly while Daniel was shoveling the snow. Her eyes were red, but her face was calm. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me. That hug said everything. I didn't ask how she found the letter. I didn't ask what she thought. Some things don't need to be spoken. They just need to be felt. And in that moment, I felt Eleanor again, standing just behind me, whispering, "You see, Robert, the circle closes." That winter was my last, but it was the gentlest one I'd ever known. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't carry regret. I carried love. And love, as Eleanor used to say, is the only thing we ever get to keep.
Morning light spilled gently through the kitchen window, soft and golden, like a quiet apology from the world. Emma sat at the table, staring at the letter she'd found the night before. She hadn't slept. She didn't want to. It was the kind of night that rearranges something inside you, the kind where the shadows whisper truth louder than people ever do. She had spent hours reading through her grandfather's journal, every word echoing his voice, warm, patient, filled with that quiet humor he used to soften hard truths. He'd always believed kindness could outlast cruelty. Now, for the first time, she understood how deeply he had lived that belief. At dawn, she made her decision. She called Attorney Dawson, the same name her grandfather had mentioned in his letters. He answered after only 2 rings, his voice heavy with familiarity. "Emma, I've been waiting for this call." Her throat tightened. "You knew? Your grandfather left instructions, said you'd reach out when you were ready. I wasn't to contact you. He wanted it to happen in your time, not anyone else's." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears. He thought of everything. "He always did," Dawson said softly. "Do you want to come in today? I think you deserve to see what he left for you." By noon, Emma was sitting in Dawson's small wood-paneled office. The walls were lined with old case files and photographs of local landmarks. A soft smell of coffee and ink filled the air, the scent of places where truth still mattered. The lawyer placed a sealed brown folder on the table between them. On the top, in her grandfather's handwriting, were 3 words, "To be opened only by Emma." Dawson nodded to her. "Go ahead." Emma opened it slowly. Inside were legal documents, grant deed transfer, trust declaration, personal testament. Each carried the same signature, Charles H. Carter. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The property deed had been signed over to a private trust, with Emma listed as the beneficiary on her 21st birthday, just like his letter had said. She looked up at Dawson. "He really left it all to me?" "Yes, your grandfather didn't want revenge. He wanted protection. For you, for the family name, and for the home he built with grace. Everything he did was about preserving love from being twisted into greed." Emma nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "And Melissa?" "He ensured the law would see it when the time came. That time came faster than anyone expected. Melissa arrived at Dawson's office that same afternoon, furious. Someone, likely one of the bank clerks, had called to inform her that the house title had been re-registered under a trust. Her control was slipping, and panic had turned to anger. The door burst open before Dawson could even stand. "You think you can just take this from me? You don't know what you're doing, girl. That property was ours." Emma didn't flinch. "It was theirs, my grandparents'. You used my grandfather's illness to take what you wanted, but you never read what he left behind." Melissa laughed bitterly. "And what's that supposed to mean? A few old letters? Sentimental nonsense?" Emma reached into her bag and placed the journal on the table.
Its leather cover was worn, but it carried weight, the kind that silences arrogance. "Read it," Emma said softly, "if you still can." For a moment no one spoke. The ticking of the wall clock filled the room. Melissa stared at the book like it was something poisonous. Her eyes darted from Emma to Dawson, then back to the journal. Finally she snapped, "I don't have time for this." She turned to leave, but Dawson's calm voice stopped her. "You should sit down, Mrs. Carter, because if you walk out now, you'll walk into a fraud investigation. There are signed statements, bank transfers, and medical records here that contradict everything you filed on her behalf." Melissa froze. Emma could see the exact moment her bravado cracked, the flicker of fear behind her eyes, the awareness that this old man she'd dismissed as powerless had been far wiser than she ever imagined. That evening, after a long, tense meeting, Melissa left in silence. The truth had been laid bare. The stolen funds were traced. The lawyer promised to handle the rest. When the door finally closed behind her, Emma felt the weight of years lift off her chest. Dawson looked at her gently. "You did what your grandfather hoped you would. You brought light back into that house." She smiled faintly through her tears. "I just followed his map." That night, Emma drove home. The old house standing quietly under the stars, the porch light flickering like it had been waiting for her. Inside, the air felt different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. She walked into her grandfather's study, where his pipe and worn books still sat exactly where he'd left them. The desk smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. On impulse, she lit a candle, the same kind he used to burn when he wrote. The flame wavered, reflecting in the window. She whispered, "I did it, Grandpa." And maybe it was her imagination, or maybe it was something more, but for just a second she swore she heard his voice, that gentle cuckle, full of pride and patience. "I know you did, kiddo. You always saw the good in things." Weeks passed. The legalities unfolded quietly. The house was secured under her name, and Melissa disappeared from town. Her father, Mark, returned one evening, humbled, quiet, holding a letter Dawson had mailed to him posthumously from his father. He stood on the porch, eyes red. "He forgave me, Em. After everything, he forgave me." I nodded softly. "He would have wanted you home." Mark's voice cracked. "Do you think he knew I didn't mean to send him away?" I reached out and held his hand. "He knew. That's why he wrote all of this, so we could find our way back." That night, father and daughter sat in the living room looking through old photo albums. Pictures of Grace's garden, summer picnics, Christmases filled with laughter. And as the firelight danced across the pages, Emma finally felt what her grandfather must have hoped for. Not revenge, not triumph, but peace. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, Emma stepped outside. The roses behind the shed were in bloom again, pale and beautiful in the moonlight. She knelt by the third bush, the one that had started it all, and whispered, "You were right, Grandpa. Truth does bloom, even after the frost." And somewhere, deep in the hush of night, the wind seemed to sigh through the garden, carrying with it a warmth she could feel in her bones, a warmth that said, "Home has found you again."